Hey, does this guy look familiar? Everybody's asking me, what's up with Mitch? So, Mitch is a federal contractor. He's a veteran. He's committed to serving his country as he continues this journey of entrepreneurship. He's so excited because he knows what a difference he can make. Seems like there's hurdle after hurdle. So, today's issue that we're going to talk about is timesheet, payroll, and billing integration in federal contracting. Had a lot of conversations with guys like Mitch. They have to decide how to move forward with their company, and they're in the early stages. Their main focus is getting new contracts in, onboarding for the slots they've got, making sure that they're doing the technical work at the top level of execution. Last thing he really wants to deal with is anything in the back office. So my first question to Mitch is, which approach would you prefer to take with this? There's basically three ways to do this. One is a do-it-yourself approach. You can research the rules online. You can look online, see what you can find. You can Google it. You may not find what you want that's specific enough to federal contracting to give you what you need. You can do that. You can teach yourself government contracting and compliance. While you're doing that, where's your revenue coming from? Where's your business development activity? How are you choosing which opportunities? How are you meeting with clients? So do it yourself? Not so sure that's going to work. Second approach is done for you. Done for you may mean that you buy that perfect accounting system. You get the exact right payroll service provider. You have the exact right timesheet system. You've hired a group of consultants that says they've done it before again and again, and they're going to do the turnkey approach, the done for you approach. You're going to hire a consulting team to put the pieces together. They're going to send down some junior consultants. You'll have a talk every once in a while with somebody that is in charge of the program, but you may not know really where they are or how long it's going to take. They're asking you certain questions that they need so that they can complete their job. And somehow it's all back on you again. So the done for you could work if you got the right approach to it. You could hire consultants to put in the system and hand you the keys. And when the time comes, you take over driving. Wait a minute. You want to bring on more revenue. You want to onboard more people on the contracts you've got because you've got open slots and you know who you can get. You've got the recruiting thing. Do you really want to run that back office system? I don't think it's the best use of your time. How about the done with you approach? Learn exactly what you need to know when you need to know it and be able to get explanations. This way, you're still in control. You are taking the steps that you need. You're able to see the progress, and you're able to include the vision of where you want to be with your back office operations, considering where you plan to take your company in the future. Now, we would all love to drop a whole bunch of money up front on the systems that you need early on so that it's scalable and ready for growth. But you know what? You got to start with something you can afford, and you have to have processes in place that are really best practices, knowing that when you double in size and then double in size again, you might have to pop up to a higher level of software. It's not just the accounting software. It's not just starting with QuickBooks. It's also, how are you going to collect your timesheets and how are you going to pay your employees? Every single one of these companies will say in their own perfect version of honesty, yes, we integrate. But you need to know, what do they mean by integration? What's it going to take? What's it going to cost? How long? How cumbersome? Is it going to work? And that's where we use the done with you approach so that you understand it and have the information to make the next steps. We anticipate where you're going to be in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 18 months, because your company could change so quickly. By having the right way that you're taking off with your customers, knowing what they need, being able to focus on them, and not having to worry about learning all this accounting stuff. You'll learn exactly what you need to know and be able to get explanations and follow proven systems and procedures to grow into integrated, scalable systems. And by scalable, we mean You may start out with a basic system and then grow into it. Just like when you got out of college, you got yourself a really nice sports car. A few years later, you found yourself married and you had more of a classic sedan or a nice SUV or something like that. And now you're thinking, I don't want to drive a minivan. I'm going to have a truck or a large SUV for my family. And that's how I'm going to do it. So, which approach do you prefer? Do it yourself, done for you, or done with you? So, let's talk a little bit about the business processes that you're going to have as a federal contractor to meet your DCAA requirements. Around this functional area, I've listed really all the different groups that you will eventually have in your system, and I've simplified that quite a bit. Human resources and payroll, timekeeping, billing, project management, financial management, and new business, because you're doing every piece of that. DCA requirements, mainly when you're small, relate to how are you keeping track of employees' time? Can we look at your accounting software and see something that we expect to see that's structured to meet our DCAA compliance rules, that you can show how you calculate indirect rates for pricing and costing? Can you prove that if we give you a federal contract, you know how to keep track of the contract value? That when we walk in or the customer calls in the middle of the day on Thursday and say, hey, bud, I gave you $175,000 on that contract. How far along are you? Can you pop up and say, we've got 70% of the funding left, 30% to go. We're on track. We expect to complete tasks 7, 8, and 9 by the end of the time. Do you want to add something to our contract? And lastly, indirect rate calculations and tracking, because as your company grows, what you had to bid to cover your cost initially is going to change. Initially, you just worried about bringing somebody on to fill those slots, make sure that you cover all your cost. You took their pay rate and multiplied it by 1.7 or 2, whatever you picked, and you got that contract in. And now you want to build. But as you build, to attract more employees, you're adding fringe benefit plans, you're adding leave, all kinds of variables. So getting from here to there is also going to involve figuring out what your company needs to look like, figuring out what your company's secret sauce is as far as technical capabilities and what you offer, but also understanding that you've got to put some of that guts in place in order to support what you say and retain that outstanding workforce, attract people to you, make sure you're not getting poached all the time by your primes. So what are these DCA rules? Okay, there's about 12 to 15 of them. I just picked out for this purpose the ones that are most directly related to payroll, labor, and billing requirements, because there are 3 or 4 pieces to this. And what I found is that systems will usually address integration between 2 systems when it really needs to be across 3 to 4 systems. Proper segregation of direct cost from indirect cost means that you can keep track of the billable stuff from the overhead stuff. Uses general ledger accounts and controls. The standard way that this would be set up is you'd have account numbers that identify cost of goods sold. Those are your direct costs. They start with a 5. Your indirect cost, fringe and overhead and G&A usually start with a 6, a 7, and 8. And your unallowable costs normally start with a 9. And those are costs like interest expense, entertainment, alcohol, company parties, donations, sponsorships, and all those things that the government says you can spend on that, you can deduct it from your taxes, has nothing to do with me, but it's coming out of your profit, better not be built up in the rates you're billing me. You have to be able to identify and accumulate cost by contract. What that means is you have to have an accounting system that has job costing. Most accounting systems do have job costing, and what you would look for is a module that says contract tracking, job costing, customers' jobs, something like that. And it would allow you that not only do you identify your employees' time by they're working for the Navy, but are they working on Navy job 17, task order 4, CLIN 2. Timesheets. need to be filled out daily. They have to show employees charging their hours to their contracts. If they're taking leave, like holiday or a paid time off, sick leave, whatever it is, different charge number for that has to be tracked. Indirect labor might be that you have somebody brought in for training that's going to be on overhead. It could be your executive staff that's G&A, general administrative, corporate costs. Everybody has to fill in a timesheet. Everybody in the company, if you're a federal contractor, should be filling out a timesheet. Sometimes there are exceptions for when you have a group that's separate, that's commercial work, but you've got to do a certain amount of work to identify that separately. The labor distribution system, and this is an cost accounting term. Labor distribution means that you take the employee's full paycheck and you look at the timesheet and you say how much of their cost based on their hours worked should be charged off between contract A and B. So in a 40-hour week, maybe they had 20 hours on the Navy contract and 20 hours on the Army contract, 50% gets split. That's what labor distribution is. But labor distribution is taking that employee's full paycheck and spreading it between the two cost objectives, final cost objectives, or contracts. If you're receiving contracts that have CLINs, task orders, delivery orders, base year, option year, you have to track to that level because that's how the funding is issued. Going to be a requirement of your accounting system. And then the last one is tracking against contract funding. Can you tell me at any point in time how much you spent against that contract and how much you have left to go? Some of this can be in spreadsheets that are part of your accounting system, and that would be considered adequate. But what we want to do is look at how much of this could we accomplish using QuickBooks, perhaps, and a payroll system and a timesheet system, or could we get all three in one when the company grows, and that would be a system like a Uninet plus payroll. Here's how I'd like you to visualize this requirement. Close your eyes and think about a timesheet that you might have your employees fill out. It's going to have their name on it. I'd want it to have their employee ID because they have an employee ID for payroll. And also when you bill, it's just been a lot easier to do it by ID in case people's names change or you have two guys named Bill Smith, something like that. I'd like the ID and the name on their timesheet. I also see that there's going to be a slot or a field where they put in the customer they're working for. I would prefer that it not just say Navy and you write in N-A-V-Y. I would like it somehow numbered so that I know, okay, that's the Navy customer and that's on task order 17 and that is on CLIN number 2. Now, you may not have to have that entire depth of a charge number, but you need to have some method where you identify the scope of work being performed to a charge number that ties into the structure that has been given to you in that government contract. The next column I need to know is, for this employee for payroll purposes, is this straight time? Is it regular time? Is it overtime? Do they get time and a half? Are they salaried employees? Do they sometimes get paid for their overtime at straight time? Sometimes they don't. What do I need to do to track it? And that's usually called a payroll item or earnings code, something along those lines. I need to know that so that I can tell my payroll person how they should be paid. What rate do they get? Because usually it's a base rate with a multiplier or something along those lines. If you've got more complex contracts or you're working OCONUS, you might have uplift, you might have differentials. If you've got Service Contract Act, you might have health and welfare, the $4 and something cents per hour that you have to show you're paying employees in lieu of benefits, cash in lieu of benefits, for example. Service item. A service item is how I identify to a billing rate or a labor category and a billing rate. It might be that that labor category is contract year 7. It might be that it's an on-site PM versus an off-site PM. It could be that they're CONUS or OCONUS. It could be that they're on a different shift. The question is, when you're calculating a billing and preparing the billing to the customer, how much information do you need in order to bill that employee right to that contract? How does it need to be summarized? Do they want everything broken down in a detail sheet and then have a summary page? Because you're going to have to build a spreadsheet to do that if you don't have an accounting system set up to do that. And when you're small, you really can't buy an accounting system that meets all these needs when you don't even know what they are because you just got started. Their hours for both billing and payroll need to be on the timesheet. Obviously, they've got to put it in by day. Every day they should be completing their timesheet, probably by 10 or 11 the next day. If somebody walked by and said, what were your hours for yesterday? It should be complete. And that would be something that sometimes DCAA will do in a floor check. The pay rate, now that won't be on their timesheet, but you need to have a way that that employee ID and the payroll item help you map to what the appropriate pay rate is for that person, because otherwise you don't have the information to pay them correctly. So you could have hourly or salary. They could be exempt. They could be non-exempt. You could have salaried overtime. Maybe as an exception, maybe everybody on that contract always gets salaried overtime at straight time. Maybe there's an approval process for when they do it. Maybe there's some times where you have a alternating work schedule, or some pay periods have 88 hours and some have 96. Sometimes you allow flex time and sometimes you don't. Gosh, it's getting to be a lot. Billing rate. How do you map the service item or labor category to a billing rate? How is that captured inside your system? How are you going to make sure you bill everybody right? In addition, on that timesheet, you're going to know the timesheet day or dates. So you know the period for which you're billing. You've got to link that to the payroll date because you want to make sure that you're consistent on paying people for these dates of the timesheet. And here's payday, so they understand what the expectations are and know that your payroll that you've issued to them is correct. And then last, the billing date. You want to be able to bill those timesheets quickly, and you want to be able to trace the billing date information back to a timesheet if you're ever requested to do so. That's a DCAA requirement. So let's go back to business processes with DCAA requirements. Let me give you an example if you wanted to use a product like Paychex, because you're already set up on Paychex. Paychex Flex would allow you to do the processing, the onboarding, the tax processing, the direct deposits, and the leave calculations to meet the requirements of human resources and payroll. Later on, you may outgrow Paychex or have to add pieces onto it because you've got full-time human resources folks and they want to add an applicant tracking system. Another piece of this might be that you want to use the online Paychex Stratus Time. It's for having employees enter their timesheets. Make sure that they're set up for daily time entry. Make sure that they have the charge numbers that they can choose from in the drop-down. You'll frequently have to do this by the way you assign people to groups. You should have a way that their employee can sign it and their supervisor can approve it. Sometimes it's a submit, sometimes it's a signature. It should track their leave availability so they don't take leave that they don't have. You should, in that same timesheet, identify the labor category for creating your billing or tracking the hours. It might be that they're a PM on two different contracts and you need to have it isolated so you can say, okay, that PM billing rate is 92 an hour and this PM billing rate is 172. Because Paychex is a separate system, even though Paychex will tell you, yes, we're integrated with QuickBooks, from a government contracting standpoint, you're going to have to do something to transfer that data over to QuickBooks, because otherwise you don't know what job the employee worked on in order to bill for it. You don't know what labor category they were in order to choose the billing rate. And then also, as a DCAA requirement, that whole labor distribution piece is where you have to show the cost of the employee's labor based on their timesheet being charged off to the jobs. Now, you may say we're all fixed price, it doesn't matter. Well, that's not entirely true. You should be able to look at any job at any point in time and tell what your profit is by job. And if you're not able to do that, the government can come in and say, perhaps you're charging the hours on that fixed price contract over here to this time and material and trying to charge us for that. Can't use that twice. The third part of the process is creating an integration between QuickBooks and your online timesheet, your online payroll system. I already warned you We're going to have to rekey. In some cases, there are ways to upload this, but it takes a lot of planning and setup to make that work, because you've got to have the code set up on the QuickBooks side to receive the data, and some corresponding or even matching codes over in the Paychex Stratus timesheet in order to collect the data correctly. You've also got to have a way that you take the distribution of the hours, the total wages for your payroll. Maybe it was $10,000 for the 4 or 5 people that you've got on board, and show how much of that $10,000 needs to be charged to which jobs based on who worked the hours, when they worked them, everything. A lot of steps to do that. So the reason I bring this all up is just to let you know that even though you'll hear those systems are integrated, I'd recommend that you have some guidance on that so that you can find out what is truly integrated and what you're going to have to do over, or else you're going to have extra costs, you're going to have delay, you're going to have frustration, you're beating your head against the wall. The recommendations that I make are making sure your employee numbers are consistent across all platforms. The charge numbers have to make sense to the employees. Maybe they should only see their charge numbers and not somebody else's. Their labor category should be set for them so they don't have to guess. They shouldn't have to know how you're going to bill that. That should be set up for them so that they only choose one. There should be clarity on when the task's end dates. For example, the hardest part is keeping track of when base year goes to option year, because sometimes, well, it almost always happens in the middle of a pay period, and you have to go around and tell people, okay, your hours through Wednesday charged to this charge number, and starting Thursday charged to the option year. You want to make sure you've got easy to understand payrolls. You want to know who gets leave. You want to know who gets time and a half. You want to know if that person, if there's a holiday for the 4th of July, do they get paid for that, or do they not have benefits? And it's one thing to make sure the employee understands it, but you also have to make sure it's consistent with human resources and that it's communicated to payroll and set up in your timesheet system, because if it was me, I wouldn't want somebody that's not eligible for holiday pay to be able to choose the holiday charge number on their timesheet. Rules, rules, rules. You want to make sure your billings are traceable to the timesheets and that you're gathering information, even if this is all fixed price, so that if you had in the future to derive a billing rate for your employees or for labor categories, so you could use it for GSA or prove it for future bids, you want to have that level of detail in your accounting system. What employee, what jobs, what pay rate, what billing rate. You've got to set it up so there's fast turnaround. The timesheets are completed, the payroll gets completed, the billing gets completed, submitted, approved, and paid. Every delay, and by that I mean every delay that rolls you into the next day, every delay that takes something that you should have done on Friday and makes it a Monday, is adding days to your process. So you want to be very quick about how your timesheets end, when the timesheets get turned in, and how to turn it over to payroll. A lot of strategies on this. You want to make sure that the processes you're using online secure access and should meet the DFARS rules for cybersecurity and also the privacy rules for safeguarding your personally identifiable information. Eventually, you want your processes documented and your staff trained, but if nothing more, if you're having to do this for the first 3 or 4 months, you need to know what the steps are, have them documented so that at some point you find a way to take this off your desk and put it on someone else's. The other thing is it's expensive, time-consuming, frustrating, maddening to change payroll systems, change accounting software, change timesheet processes, because every time you change one element, it has a ripple effect on the others. Think about what you want to be on now and at what point you would feel like you grew enough to be into the next system, what that might entail. It is very easy to get sold a system that's larger than you can handle, and we all know we've been there. Then you're locked into something that's too expensive for you to maintain, too slow for you to learn it, and you're not getting the results you want. So back here to Mitch. Mitch is just saying, Jenny, I just want to get it right. I want to get everything right. I want everybody to get paid right. I want my customer billings to be right. I want the billings to be approved to paid. I want to pay attention to the base year and the option year. I don't want any issues with funding and overruns. And I want to be able to pass a DCAA and DCMA audit or whatever comes around. So again, let me ask you, what approach do you prefer? Are you looking for a do-it-yourself? Is that your preference to do it? Perfectly acceptable. Are you looking for a done for you where you get a third party to do all this and hand you the keys and you take over driving? Are you looking for a done with you where just like everything else you're having to learn as you get into federal contracting, we're improving your knowledge base and giving you access to best practices and talking to you about options so you can make the choices that you think give you the best long-term strategy and reduce your risk. So if you're interested in more information or want to talk to us about the done with you approach, visit our website at solvability.com. That's www.solvability, SOLV as in Victor, ABILITY.com. We've got podcasts out there if you look at the podcast tab, and those would be some that you could listen to just to increase your overall understanding. And I'm always looking for other topics that people would be interested in. When you're ready, love to talk to you. If you want to email me at jwclark@solvability.com. That's JWCLARK at solvability, SOLV as in Victor, ABILITY.com. Or you can call me on my cell phone, 256-882-6276, to schedule a conversation about your goals, your growth, and your targets. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope to hear from you soon.